All right. Hello, welcome and thank you everyone for joining us for this panel, International Collaborations to Combat Climate Change, hosted by the University of California Trust UK and UC San Diego Scripps Institution of Oceanography. My name is Violet Del Toro and I am the Director of Development for UC San Diego covering the United Kingdom and Europe. As some of you might know, this autumn the United Kingdom will host the 26th United Nations Climate Change Conference of the Parties, otherwise known as COP26, in Glasgow, Scotland. The goal of this conference is to accelerate action towards the goals made at the Paris Agreement. So given that we have so many brilliant alumni across the UK and EU working in organizations and roles that are also progressing change towards these goals, we thought we'd hold our own mini international COP. So let me turn over now to our moderator, Callum Mcdonald, and they can introduce themselves.
Everybody, I think I've successfully unmuted myself, which is an achievement for the evening. My name is Callum Mcdonald, and I must start with an apology because I'm not a UCSD alumnus. I'm actually UCLA, but I hope I will be forgiven because I'm involved tonight because I'm a very active supporter of the University of California Trust. I'm also, I should say, developer of wind farms in Scotland, community-owned wind farms where the profit goes back into the community. So I have a very direct interest in the whole climate change debate. I was previously a member of Parliament in Westminster for about almost 20 years. So again, I've got that kind of political perspective on these issues as well. We've got a fantastic panel here tonight. As Violet said, we wanted to have our own international conference, and we've got people from a range of different countries in Europe and the States who are also all working in a range of different countries, but they're all connected because they're all graduates of UCSD. And rather than introduce them in turn, I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves because what I'd like them to do is not just simply introduce themselves, but say a little bit about where they're currently working and how it impacts upon the climate change agenda, and also how they got there and the role that UCSD played in all of that as well. So it's more than just a simple introduction I'm going to ask of them. And I'm going to start off, if I can, following the list on my page with Dr. Maria de Oca.
Hello, thank you, Callum, and also thank you, Violet, Sarah, and the teams at the UC Trust UK and UCSD Scripps alumni for organizing this fantastic event. I've had the opportunity to meet briefly earlier my fellow panelists, and I'm already really inspired and looking forward to learning more from them in the hour that we will be sharing today. So briefly to introduce myself, following Callum's indications, I graduated from Scripps at UCSD in 2010 with a master's in marine biodiversity and conservation as a fellow of the Spanish La Caixa Foundation. And I moved on to complete my PhD at Duke University in biological oceanography as a James B. Duke Fellow, to then make a career transition to the corporate world via an MBA at IESE Business School in Barcelona, Spain. So currently, I'm in the corporate global sustainability team at Henkel in our headquarters in Düsseldorf, Germany. Here, we design the company's sustainability strategy and we support its implementation. We are a German family chemical company with presence all over the world. So we have more than 170 production sites worldwide, and we are more than 50,000 employees. We've been in operation for 144 years, and we are a DAX listed company. So last year, which was a Corona year, we still reported sales of more than 19 billion euros. We have three business lines: adhesive technologies, laundry and home care, and beauty care. And if you have had a touch point with us in the past, it probably has been via our leading brands. So Loctite super glue, or the Pritt Stick for adhesives, Schwarzkopf hair care products from beauty care, or our laundry detergents, of which our leading brand is Persil. So in terms of Henkel's involvement in combating climate change, I would highlight from our sustainability strategy our ambition to become climate positive by 2040, and our interim science-based targets that we have set ourselves to achieve this ambition. So, for example, we are reducing our Scope 1 and 2 emissions by 75% by 2030, taking 2010 as a base year. And also by 2030, we will be sourcing all our electricity from renewables. We are also working with our suppliers, with our customers and our consumers to reduce our carbon footprint. Reason being that most of the carbon footprint of our products is in the raw materials we source and in the consumer use phase. So as you can imagine, this work requires partnerships at every level. So the topic of today's event, and we have many partnerships with different parts of our sustainability strategy, with fellow industry partners, also across industries and internationally as well as locally. Today, I might draw, in my answers, examples from my current work, but I'm not representing Henkel. So I'm here as a UCSD alumni, so feel free to express any opinion or concern you might have of the corporate world or the chemical industry. And sort of to close my introduction and sort of return to my starting point, so UCSD, this idea of how did I get here and how did my UCSD experience get me here, or what do I apply today from it? I would say that it's mainly two things. So one is the interdisciplinary aspect, and then secondly is a bit the attitude. So working in sustainability is an inherently interdisciplinary affair. You have to be able to understand and work with all angles of an issue. So taking, for example, a concrete example in climate is an initiative to, for example, make carbon neutral products. So to make this happen, we have to work across the company with marketing, R&D, operations, finance, just to name a few of the main functions involved, right? And, I started building these skills necessary in order to perform in such a role during my master's at UCSD. So at UCSD, we took classes in departments across campus, and we were in those classes expected not only to deliver on our assignments, but also participate, provide insight, and during class, and that can be challenging, right? And then to my second point of the attitude. So at UCSD, the UCSD community represents non-tradition, it represents innovation, the pursuit of the greater good, right? So that's in sort of all our brochures, but it's also something that you live there every day, right? And this is what I try to continue experiencing through the UCSD alumni events as a regional ambassador here in Germany, and also something that I try to bring every day in my work in Henkel. So definitely UCSD was a turning point in my career, and an experience that continues to shape me as a professional.
Thanks very much, Maria. That will be of huge interest and encouragement to a lot of people watching us. And I think you gave a very good indication of the sheer complexity of the whole climate change agenda when it comes to something like industry and the chemicals industry in particular. Next on my list is Emily Cito. So I'm going to call in Emily, and if she can also do a little self-introduction, that would be great.
Thanks very much, Callum. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be joining from. I'm Emily Cito, and I currently work as the Senior Strategy Manager in Ofgem's Decarbonization and Strategy team. Ofgem, in case you didn't know, is Great Britain's gas and electricity market regulator. I did my master's degree in international affairs from UCSD's School of Global Policy and Strategy. The MIA, as Maria sort of alluded to earlier, is also an interdisciplinary sort of foundational degree. And if there's one thing I'd pick out that opened the door for me to a career in climate change and energy, I'd say it was the quantitative methods courses that I took. They were integral to me getting my first job at a carbon reduction project developer. And from there, building my career has been about finding new challenges, but also selecting roles and companies and organizations where I can add another skill set in my toolbox of capabilities. With respect to Ofgem's goals and toward climate change, as a regulator, we work hand in hand with central government to achieve net zero by 2050. And we have two equally important challenges in that. We protect the interests of consumers today to make sure they get a fair deal, and in the future as we tackle climate change. Energy is one of the biggest emitting sectors globally, so we have our work cut out for us, and certainly we're looking at the crossroads of energy and transport and a significant electric vehicle uptake in GB, given the ban on new petrol and diesel cars from 2030, means that we are going to have a significant increase in electricity demand. And this is also in an era where in Great Britain, we're expecting an increase in variable renewable energy generation. So wind generation, solar PV generation. And Ofgem aims to incentivize the lowest cost decarbonized system possible from its network operators, for example. My role, what I do on a day-to-day basis, I work actually like an internal consultant, where I'm put on a project for 3 to 6 months at a time to incubate new policy or get something over a milestone, such as a board paper. And then I leave it to the core policy team to run with it at cruising altitude. And then I ramp down and I move on to the next thing. But my recent work has been around the role of innovation and what innovation we need to get us to net zero. Internally within Ofgem, innovation has not always been aligned. So I had some work to do to bring that together under the umbrella of Ofgem's innovation vision. And in my consulting format, I joined up with our monopoly network price control team to design the Strategic Innovation Fund, which is a minimum £450 million innovation funding mechanism to tackle network-related challenges. And lastly, I'm looking at the kind of innovation we need in the retail market so that energy suppliers can be better partners to everyday consumers like you and me and bring us along the net zero journey. So that's me. With that, I'll hand it back to Callum. Thanks very much.
Thanks very much, Emily. That was fascinating. And Emily, of course, working for Ofgem, that regulates the wind industry, which is what I'm working in, so she's regulating me. So I'll try my best not to annoy her in the course of this discussion. The next person on our list is Dr. Raphael Moormans. Dr. Raphael, who works with in Belgium with, well, I'll let you do the self-introduction. Dr. Raphael, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Callum. I'm delighted for the opportunity to be here and discuss these important topics with everyone here. So my name is Raphael. I graduated from Scripps Institution of Oceanography in 2011, where I did my master's and my undergrad in earth sciences. And currently I'm the head of sustainability at a soccer club based in Brussels, Belgium, called the Royal Union Saint-Gilloise. And there my role is, I serve as head of sustainability, which is a new role that was created 6 months ago for the soccer club. We were freshly promoted to first division. And as the club kind of progresses from an amateur structure, a very small business enterprise, to a professional soccer club, the management decided to put sustainability really at the core of our development and to instill sustainability best practices into everything we do. So that goes from reducing our carbon footprint with the goal of being net zero by 2030, for example, but it's also about raising awareness and taking advantage of the unique position a soccer club may have in the community in terms of inspiring people and showing leadership. It's really to take that opportunity as well. Yeah, so that's my role now. I did a number of things between my graduation from Scripps and my current role. So first of all, I got my PhD in natural hazard mitigation. That was in Paris in France. And then I moved to Belgium, and then I served as a data science consultant. First of all, very general perspective with the goal really of broadening my horizons and really getting to know all the different industries. And then I decided to do a similar role, so data science consulting, but really focused on sustainability. So the kinds of projects that I'd work on were things like analyzing land suitability for agriculture clients or for aquaculture clients, or investigating the potential of some natural climate solutions such as reforestation, agroforestry, and that kind of stuff. And then also some climate risk modeling. And then finally, being a huge soccer fan, I was very excited to take up this current role in a soccer club and to lead the sustainability initiatives in an industry where sustainability is very at its early stages compared to some other industries. And really what drove me throughout this whole path from being at UCSD to my current role was first of all, passion, and then the desire to solve problems with a data-driven and a science-driven approach, and to have a positive impact on the community and the environment.
Thanks very much indeed, Raphael, and congratulations on it's a good time to join when the team is getting promotion. It's always adds to the excitement. And the next one I'm going to call on is Dr. Daniela Reimer from, well, based in Germany, but working for the British Embassy. But again, I'll let you do the introductions.
Yeah, thank you, Callum, for that. And I'm also really looking forward to the discussion we have today. So my name is Daniela Reimer, and I'm the Deputy Head for Science and Innovation Germany of the UK Government Science and Innovation Network. And I'm based in the British Consulate in Munich, Germany. So our team is split between the embassy in Berlin and the consulate we have down in Bavaria and Munich. I have a strong interdisciplinary background in biology, biotechnology, and bioinformatics with several degrees from German universities. And I joined UCSD a little bit later than all my other colleagues here tonight. So after my PhD, I worked for 3 years as postdoctoral scholar at the Scripps Institution of Oceanography in the Center for Marine Biotechnology and Biomedicine with a focus on marine microbial natural products. And to my prior scientific training was added then an entirely new dimension at UCSD, covering marketing, business models, and strategies in a micro MBA summer program and an innovation to market class at the Rady School of Management at UCSD. And this is a program which was specifically targeting at that stage like PhD students and also postdoctoral students, giving us another great opportunity to not only focus on our research, but really look broader into how science can and innovations can be to other aspects. And also as a result of this, then in the 4th Treat and Innovation Network Challenge from UCSD, I was together with colleagues awarded the 2nd place for an idea for a seaweed-based food wrap providing an alternative solution to plastic pollution, CO2 emission, and freeze rate. And at this time, we really were hoping that we have a great idea can start our own businesses. Unfortunately, the idea itself was great, but it was not really viable. So I continued doing my research in the lab. But this experience at UCSD also really marks the beginning of my career change from doing actively just research to switching to science management and also technology transfer. And now, nearly 5 years ago, I left California and returned back home to Germany to work first as a technology manager at the Technical University of Munich's Office for Research and Innovation, with a focus on the university's intellectual property and science management for life sciences and economy. And as part of that position, I work closely on university strategies where ideas and innovations are understood to be key contributions to a technological and social progress in general. So there we were already focusing how science and solution can be part of the bigger picture, which is like always from our perspective, the important part. And then 2.5 years ago, I added another layer by joining the consulate working for the UK government. So this means adding to science management, also like the political level. And the UK Science and Innovation Network is a global network jointly funded by the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office and the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. We are located in nearly 40 countries worldwide. We are existing already, I think, nearly since 20 years or something. Of course, the network is expanding as international collaboration getting more important, and as we have seen during the pandemic, as important as never before, I would say. And our main objective is to foster science and innovation collaboration in areas of mutual interest, in my case, between Germany and the UK, and also, of course, in the multilateral aspect where we, of course, then look more on the European picture. With a particular emphasis on new technologies and technology translation and promoting UK science excellence and policies across Germany. We are also interested how science advice can inform government policies. So our work in general in the team is focused on several topics of the UK's industrial strategy. And within our team, I'm leading on emerging technologies, such as AI and quantum technologies, which of course also have like impact in different areas as health, but also and I'm also leading on our SIN work related to the science aspects of UK's COP26 objectives and longer-term perspectives related to climate change research and sustainability. We do see science as an important pillar to inform the ambitious climate targets and influence political decisions and policies. And science helps highlighting the case for ambitious mitigation and adaptations action and net zero pathways in general, but also support others and supports the public in visualizing science and understanding the solutions. And to be a little bit more concrete as part of my work, I engage directly with the research community in the UK and in Germany, with funding agencies and governments to explore, for example, where collaboration would support the identification of research gaps in relation to climate change, or where best practice sharing experience could support others or encourage others to really do more evidence-informed policy making. And just to mention like 2 examples we are currently working on. One is the, as part of UK FCDO, we are currently co-developing an international adaptation research alliance to support effective adaptation to climate change, primarily in developing countries. And then also like in June, the UK government just announced the Vision to a Global Net Zero Future project, which is a project bringing together academics and local citizens from across the world to look at the innovations and approaches that could deliver a greener carbon neutral society. And also, as Maria said, I'm officially not representing the UK government today, but of course I will mention a few highlights from our work, but also will speak from my personal perspective a little bit.
Thanks very much, Daniela. It must be very confusing at times representing the UK government, but I'll skip over that. And our final panelist is Joy Kamagi. Hello, Joy. Could you give a self-introduction as well, please? And then we'll engage with a couple of topics for discussion, but all the panel can join in.
Yes,
Joy.
Thank you, Callum, and thank you to all the collaborators. I really am excited for today's panel. So I'll keep my introduction fairly brief. My name is Joy Kamagi, and I currently work for IPBES within the Technical Support Unit on Knowledge and Data. So for those who may be a little bit unfamiliar with IPBES, IPBES is a science policy platform who is dedicated to strengthening policy and decisions through science for the conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity, long-term human well-being and sustainable development. You might be familiar with IPCC, so we're basically the biodiversity and ecosystem services science policy platform, but similar. So in 2019, you may have heard of the global assessment, which was released, and that would be from IPBES. So while IPBES's primary focus is on biodiversity and ecosystem services, some assessments do cover the interactions of climate change and biodiversity, and it's seen that if tackled together, they often offer opportunities to maximize the benefits between the two. So moving a little bit towards my role in IPBES, I work primarily to help the platform implement our IPBES data management policy, and I help assessment experts implement the fair data management principles, both in meetings and also producing various technical guidelines and tutorials to help that process. And I coordinate the task force on knowledge and data. So we have particular activities and outputs that are determined by the governments during plenaries, and I help coordinate them. We make sure that we do those activities and outputs. So the overall goal of our little team is basically to increase the transparency of the platform and therefore increasing the scientific credibility of the best. So while I currently work in Frankfurt, Germany, I'm actually originally from Hawaii in the United States. I pursued my bachelor's and master's in marine biology at UCSD and Scripps Institution of Oceanography. So after my master's, I worked in Octavio Berto's lab, primarily using GIS techniques to answer various questions about mangroves and conservation. And I learned a lot of spatial analysis techniques and data management during my master's in this position. And during this time, I worked on a white paper with a lot of different international collaborators. I met Idini Amir, who advertised the position at IPBES, and thus I ended up there. So I always knew that I wanted to work internationally. It's been very much like a heart of mine since I was little, and I'm very interested, and I have been and am very interested in continuing to use science to increase the well-being of both people and planet. So I currently am working in more science policy, and I have a research background. So the position at IPBES really appealed to me because it was both aligned with what I want to do, and it also used a lot of the technical skills I gained during my master's in coding and spatial analysis. And also it's really dependent upon the coordination skills, which I gained during UCSD in my undergrad. I worked with various external organizations and helped coordinate different things and really built up those skills that really are key to my success today. So I'm really excited to engage with all of you, and I'm looking forward to the discussion. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much indeed, Joy. Thank you to all for your self-introductions. I think everybody will be impressed by the fascinating range of expertise and knowledge and experience indeed that you all represent in this area. So I'm going to chuck in a question, and I should say that anybody who wants to put in questions, just enter them in on the question sort of option at the bottom of the screen. But the first question I've got for our panel is, having gone through some of the complexity of the issues involved, who do you think should be primarily responsible for driving the agenda here and for delivering the change? Is it government, in your view? Is it industry, really, that's primarily responsible? Is it individuals who need to drive the change? And has your views on that changed in light of your own experience in each of your areas? So I'm just going to throw it open and to see if anybody flags up a hand, I'll go straight to them. Emily, yes,
Great.
You start off.
Okay, I'll kick things off. Thanks very much. So when I first started working in climate change in 2008, part of the reason I got involved was because climate change was a commercial business proposition. And I thought, well, this is fantastic. We've sort of moved from maybe like the NGO Greenpeace, hippie, I don't mean to offend anyone, sorry if I have, sort of approach to saving the world to commercial-based mechanism. And I fully believed that this was going to make a significant difference. And this was, a huge leap forward for climate change. Over the years, I've switched, from private to public sector. I've worked in different different contexts now. And I don't see the world as black and white anymore. I certainly think that each of these sort of groups, government, private sector, individuals, have their own sort of role to play. And maybe fellow panelists can agree, disagree, or comment further. Thanks.
Danielle?
Yeah, I will completely agree what Emily said. So I think it has to be a joint approach, and we really have to tackle like the whole society. And this is from my perspective. Of course, government has to give like a framework where we work in. I think what's also important is especially tackling climate change, that we see it as a collaboration and not a competition between countries, between industry sectors or whatever. I think this is an important part, and also like a collaboration with all these actors. So this means including science evidence in decision making, but also including the public, really explaining what's the benefit for them. And I think this is something which is differ a lot between the sectors, how much there's engagement between these parties. It differs between the countries. There are big differences on that. And I think that's like, from my personal perspective, that's the way we have to go. And we have to find a way where like everybody is like happy taking this approach. And of course, these things to be implemented in parallel, have to be implemented reflecting all their own objectives. And it's not that it should be just top down from a government or just bottom up from the public or industry itself or something like that.
Anybody else want to come in on that one?
Yes.
Maria.
Thank you. So yeah, I'm hopefully I'm not disappointing anyone, but I agree with the panelists here. I'm not going to take a strong stance for one or another, who is the leader. Reason being is I feel like the responsibilities, or let's say the roles that Daniela here or Emily were talking about, like the roles of each one of us, or they actually overlap. So it's and it is each industry that brings a different angle to it that needs to be incorporated in order for the solutions to actually address the problem fully. And that in some ways makes it fascinating, but also it's really challenging. So we are more used to, for example, in business, we are more used to solving individual, very defined problems, this is a marketing problem or this is a finance problem, and they're nicely separated. But the thing with sustainability is that you don't find those clear lines. So it's, yeah, like at the same time a challenge, and also sometimes it gets in the way of actually driving solutions as fast as we would like to. But I think also interesting on this is it's overlapping and sort of thinking about where are the limits to each one of our responsibilities, right? So, and thinking here from the corporate sort of perspective and how things have changed in business, and also the reason why I wanted to join business, right? It is, it used to be that, business would have to take care of what happened within its walls, right? It's, when we create our products, we don't, take water from places that we shouldn't or whatever. And, like that, we comply and we're good, right? But it's not like that anymore, right? In today's world, you have to, your responsibility is beyond your walls, beyond our individual business. And so just to give you an example, things that we do in corporate in order to address this, and is for example, develop what is the sustainability portfolio of our products. So every new product that we roll out has to have some sort of additional performance in the sustainability space. It's not really acceptable anymore. Wide in the industry, it's not just us, but if you look at large corporates and the type of products that we start rolling out, we cannot just roll out a product that it needs a lot of water to be used, or that you have to your emissions when you use this product are sky high. I mean, or that it has a huge amount of packaging. Not only is it not, it's just people won't buy it, like people don't want that anymore. So I do see that, it is that leadership, that each one of us has to have. In our case, it is, in the products that we deliver, in the performance that we deliver. But then at the same time, it is like my colleagues here were mentioning, it is about also, consumers using, being educated and using the products correctly, also consumers demanding from us this kind of performance, right? And then government sort of setting the stage for us to be able to roll out these products in a way that is, profitable for the business, right? At the end of the day. So it all really comes together, and yeah, bottom line, the responsibilities are, they're not so clearly divided, but we are all working together at the end in the same direction, right?
Anybody else want to come in? Joy, excellent.
Yes, I would have to completely agree with all my panelists that collaborations between all personal, corporate, and governmental levels is absolutely critical. Maybe I'll speak a little bit more to the personal level, since that was a little less clear. I think it's really important for each of us to change our habits of consumption and to talk about it. I think that we have a lot of influence over the culture around us, over the people around us, and having this just general discussions, talking about things that we see, I think can go a really long way. Just like how someone would talk about their faith, you should also talk about these things as well. And I think there's just like, I know that my family members, like I like share things with them and they're like, oh, what can I do on like a day-to-day level to like address these things? Like I want to make a difference. And I think having those conversations are like so important, because as like these high-level governmental things are happening, I think it's really good that the culture is also moving along with that, and as we'll buy products that are more sustainable and also support policies that are in this direction that might actually, it might be a little bit more expensive to do that. So yeah, that's what I just thought I'd add to the conversation.
Anybody else on that topic? I've got a question that has come in actually, which I think is germane to it from one of the audience. And it's about ESG, environmental and social governance. And I think this person might be working in the financial sector, because they're asking whether any of you have worked with the financial sector in terms of ESG issues, and whether the financial sector have been driving those issues if you're working for companies, for example, and indeed more broadly for your thoughts on how the financial sector, financial institutions and banks can play a stronger role in driving policy to tackle climate change. Anybody want to come in on that? Anybody got thoughts on that or any expertise in the financial sector? No.
I think Emily wants to take this one.
I'm not sure I can take it fully, and so Maria, feel free to jump in. I just have really a general broad commentary to response to that. I don't have, I haven't worked with financial institutions on this. I also noticed that financial climate risk is a burgeoning area. There are a lot of consulting companies that are engaging with institutions on this, trying to help financial services build out and understand their strategy, their risk management, etc. I would just say that to me, what I see is that the apparent framework against which to sort of have this conversation is the TCFD, the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures. So I don't know if this person is looking for advice specifically there, or seeking career advice or what have you, but perhaps they can write in afterwards and can do our best to address that. Maria, what else did you want to add?
Yes, I would just add in terms of, so yeah, I haven't worked for a financial institution, but being in the corporate global sustainability team, we are, let's say, the point of contact for investors to the company, right? So if an investor has a question on what are we doing about palm oil, smallhold farmers in, we are the ones that have to answer, right? So in that sense, what I would say is that I am, investors are our most demanding, I would say, of our stakeholders. Like they keep us in check, and they, it is not only by individual inquiries. So, for example, we also have the CDP, the Carbon Disclosure Project. It is essentially a platform where pretty much every company in the world discloses their how they are, their climate policies and the targets that they're working towards, and their engagement programs, everything. And there we have to disclose everything. I mean, because essentially it is a high level exposure. It is something that is, appears in the media every year, and every company wants to, compete and rank well in the CDP, right? And the CDP is something that is requested for us to fill out by investors. So, like they are, I would say, they're a very good driving force for climate policy and strategy in large corporations, definitely. But going back to the beginning of my answer in terms of individual inquiries, like we engage with them directly on these issues. Like it's a continuous conversation. They are very well informed. I mean, they won't, these are people that are very well educated and that are really invested in pushing forward ESG issues through their investments. And yeah, definitely, it is as much as I get in contact with the reality of this, definitely financial institutions and banks do play a strong role. And so now for climate, and sorry, just one final point. And so Emily was mentioning the TCFD, and then there's the TNFD. So so essentially investors are now moving, let's say they're from the climate issue, which is, let's say, somewhat resolved, to the nature issue, so to the biodiversity issue, of which Joy here is much the expert. So these sort of inquiries are stepping up, because the nature biodiversity issue is actually a lot more complex, and so we are starting to get inquiries about that too. So yeah, definitely, it's they have a very strong role.
Right, well, thanks very much. We actually had about 2 or 3, 4 questions on the finance sector, all driving at the same point, and I think so that's been a very useful discussion. I think we've had another question in, which it says, which area of global sustainability policy will take the most work to change or innovate? I suppose this is what we used to call a few years back kind of the wicked issues, the wicked problems. The difficult ones to tackle for people involved in economic and public policy. So which is the wicked problem that you can think of in this agenda that's going to take the most work and most difficult to tackle? Any that strikes you? Anybody volunteering something that keeps them awake at night about how we can change and move it forward? Or is it all very difficult? Joy?
Yeah, I definitely don't think I have the most wicked issue, or that there are probably a lot of issues here that are really difficult to tackle. But I think one particular item that I think about often is addressing spillover or leakage effects. So that basically the pollution or the impacts of our biodiversity and habitat degradation, as well as climate change, often impact, often demand is driven by high income countries, and it's felt by lower income countries that thus meet that demand and they use their natural resources and sometimes not in the most sustainable ways to meet the meet demand by higher income countries. And I think this is a really complicated global issue, and there's a lot that corporations and governments can do to prevent this, for sure. And I would be really happy to see more policy and more corporations really considering this And as well, so I have a perspective of, you know, I'm in the science policy world and less of the business. So I don't see as clearly what corporations are doing, but I'm really, I would love to hear what other panelists have to say about that. So.
Daniela?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with Joy. And I also would say that this is, like, from my perspective, the biggest issue. And luckily, there has been a lot of change in the last couple of years. And I think most often we again have the problem that it's not as visible, because normally in the US or in Europe, we are focused on what's happening in our countries and not what our countries are doing for the developing countries, for example. And I mean, just with the merger between the FCO and the DFID in the UK, we really put also this developing aspect closer to the foreign politics. And also, like, from a science perspective, like science for developing countries got like more greater input perspective, and we see the same in Germany. For example, the Federal Education Ministry, who's also like funding a lot of these action-orientated research projects, helping to support developing countries. So the ministry has an Africa strategy, working closely also together with the economic ministry in Germany, really to foster. They are also on an international level, because we have to tackle this globally again, to support developing countries in Africa, in Southern America, in Asia or something, to really also, like, there we are again at the point about educating people, also helping them to help themselves find the solution, implement the solutions within their countries. And I think that's like a big task of the developed world, to really support here and not only focus on our own agenda within our own countries, but see it really globally.
Thanks very much for that. With my ex-political background, if I had been asked that question, I would have said, making it, the wicked issue is the financial impact upon people who are not very well off anyway, and, you know, making it not too hard, and make it certainly not so hard that people are not attracted to the whole task of tackling climate change. And we did get a question that touched on that, which is, how do we make sustainable and climate conscious living accessible, especially to those who come from lower economic backgrounds. So I was going to bring in Raphael on that if I could, because it strikes me that you're dealing with an organization where a lot of people go to football matches are not very well off people, and you want to keep your football matches accessible as well as enjoyable, and yet you're trying to drive through something that must incur costs to your business, to your club. So I'm just wondering, what kind of debates do you have about that, and what kind of advice do you have about how to try to tackle those issues?
Yeah, but as you say, it's a very difficult issue. It's indeed a challenge that we're facing. But I think the role that we want to take as a soccer club is to kind of lead by example. Again, it's difficult. There's a big component of education. There's a big component as well of like changing one's behavior, which is not easy at all, especially in terms of consumer behavior, in terms of changing, for example, just transportation habits, and in terms of knowing the impact. I think some of the questions that we've got, so as I said earlier, we're really in the beginning of our sustainability program, but we've had conversations with all of our stakeholders, including our fans, but not only our fans, also our players, for example, and a lot of them have heard of climate change, have sometimes not heard of sustainability. But when we explain it to them, they're like, okay. But then they want to know facts. And you just tell them, give them examples of facts that for some people might seem very obvious. I think for all the panelists around here that we're just having this discussion, it's clearly an issue. And for some people, it's not an issue just because they're not aware of it. So just bringing some information, some facts, and also leading by example and allowing them to change their behaviors, for example. It's a very simple example, but we might say a lot of places say, we need to recycle, but they don't put recycling bins. And so that's a very simple problem to solve, but that's something that we want to do. With that, for example, we noticed our recycling bins are not well placed and we don't have enough for the entire stadium to be able to, they would have to make a big detour on their way out, for example, to go and sort their waste. And it's very basic, but it's the role that we have to play to enable them to be more conscious and to act in a more sustainable manner.
All right, thanks very much, Raphael. I've got another question coming in thick and fast. One of them was quite specific. It's thoughts on the challenges of making the fishing industry more sustainable, given the recent attention to the film Seaspiracy. So that sounds like a biodiversity hot potato. So I might chuck it at Joy. Is that right? Am I fair in doing that?
I am not a fisheries biologist. I am much more focused on the habitat restoration and conservation. So I am definitely not the person to be answering this question. So I will perhaps give it to someone else. As a fish, I mean, the thing is, like, there's communities and there's countries and there's people who rely on fishing. Like, it's like an essential component to their communities. And basically, the really great thing about the fisheries is that if you're able to increase stocks and make things more sustainable, that ends up with more fish for people to eat. So it's like definitely a win for everyone if you're able to come to a solution to make it more sustainable. But I am not in the position to give educated solutions on that. So.
Well, my constituency when I was a politician was indeed a fishing constituency. And it came up every year when I went to the fishermen's AGM, where I would try to explain the tragedy of the commons and why we can't have a free-for-all. And by the end of the meeting, I thought I would have convinced them. The next year, the same complaints would arise again about quotas and all the rest of it. So it is a difficult thing to tackle. Maria, you had your hand up.
Yeah, if I may add, I mean, right now, so I did a career transition, so I'm not really involved with fisheries and the oceans directly anymore in my day-to-day. But I mean, from what I remember and the experience that I had, so I think it's important to first, I mean, the Seaspiracy documentary, I would just say that there's a lot of inaccuracies and just leave it for another moment. I'm happy to go over details of it. So I'm not saying that everything is wrong. I'm very glad that they brought up certain topics that weren't, like they say, that are not so much spoken about, but there are certain inaccuracies that make their thesis a little weak, let's say, at least in my opinion. But I think in terms of solutions to the issues with the fishing industry, I think we have to distinguish two things. So first is the legal fishing, and then there's the illegal unreported. So it's two different sort of realities. So in the legal, I would say it's, from my opinion, I would say it's mostly about subsidies. So if government, we need to lower the government subsidies on fishing. A lot of the fishing that is being done is only possible because of subsidies. So, take those subsidies away, or at least part of them, and part of the problem will be solved. The problem then is what Joy was mentioning about people, like areas like, for example, Galicia in the north of Spain, northwest of Spain, is completely dependent on the fishing industry. So, and people know about doing that, and not, and that's it. So it's not like, from one day to the next you can just take away their livelihood and you know, sort of think that that's okay, you know. So that on the one hand, and then illegal fishing, that's a lot harder. I mean, that's and because the oceans are vast, there's nothing out there. I mean, I when I was doing my PhD and I did jobs as a research technician, I would spend months at, you know, in the ocean, 1 month at a time on research and so on. There's nothing there. I mean, you could do anything. so the thing is, it's very difficult to enforce policies. But I would say maybe, you know, if we have a bit of a silver bullet, it might be technology, you know, and so now we have the Ocean Fishing Watch, or the Global Fishing Watch. Sorry, Joy knows this better than me, and so, you know, things like that, technologies that can let's say allow us be there when we're not there physically, because, you know, it's just logistically impossible. Things like that is the type of solutions I think that could make an impact in the, at least in the relative, if not short, medium term. Yeah.
It's a good example of an area where the solution seems so obvious, but it's tremendously difficult for lots of departments to implement and deliver. Okay, we've got, it's time to wrap up, so I'm going to ask you all one final question, which comes from one of the questions that came in, which was, which do you think is the single issue that needs to be addressed most urgently in your view? And if I could just add a tag, because you've all studied, lived, worked in Europe and America, what is the thing that either side of the Atlantic could learn from the other in tackling climate change? What has been good in the American side in your experience? What's good in the European side in your experience? And you're going to have to answer that in very short order. So, okay, if you're able to do it, then shall we go? Let's go, start off with Joy, and because I'll work backwards from the way I came in. So start with Joy.
Hello. I think that in the US, we can learn a lot from European countries in terms of how to make sustainability and climate change and the various environmental crises we're in as like a frontline issue. I think in the US, there's still like, just to take a very everyday example, like our recycling is just one giant bin that you put some things in, and you move to Germany and it's like all divided. And I think there are a lot of ways in which the society in Europe is just much more considering these issues on a day-to-day basis. I think we in the US could learn a lot from it. And I think one thing we do have in the US that makes our solutions to climate change and biodiversity crises and sustainability in general very good is that we have a lot of wilderness still left. Like compared to at least the European countries, like we have a lot of overgrowth forests in California, and we have a lot of natural resources that are still preserved. And I think that prioritizing that and being able to find solutions that both benefit biodiversity and climate change is really essential. And I think that there's a lot that we can do in the United States that the European countries actually don't have the opportunity to do. So I'll end on that.
Thanks, Joey. Yeah, good old John Muir, who was Scottish, of course. The next one is Daniela on the list.
I will maybe
one example, because we're short of time, so see if you can pick one out.
I mean, it's not necessarily between Europe and the US, but it's also like within Europe, for example. And I think what other countries could learn from the UK, for example, is that we are taking really ambitious targets, and that we really try to tackle these from a whole approach. So really, like, for example, if you look into what's going on in energy systems or something like that, this is something where in the UK, we study the whole system, like the renewables, what is needed in the grid and everything. And for example, in Germany, we really have problems, and they try to address like aspects individually. And then at some point, they try to bring everything together. And I think it's just a very too slow process. And this is something I think we should really look to other countries where in which is doing a great job. And I think this is something where a lot of people could learn, or countries could learn from the UK approach.
Thanks, Daniela. Raphael?
Yes, so just as Daniela, it's not necessarily a US versus Europe point that I will make right now, but it's just two very short points. One of the things that we really need to do is create a dialogue around climate action. And then one thing that I think is also very important is for governments to provide incentives for all players to take action at their own level, whether it's corporations or individuals.
All right. Good point. Emily, you're next.
Great, thanks. So coming from a recent energy background, I think my response is sort of centered around that. I think that GB can learn a lot from California actually in how its energy institutions are organized and how they're incentivized. In California, there's CAISO, California Independent System Operator, which is incorporated in a certain way that its responsibilities and governance means that it can promote good behavior within its territory. And currently, speaking from personal observation, in Great Britain, it's not necessarily as such. So that's what I'd say.
Good point. That rings a bell with me. Maria, you get the final word.
Yeah, so very briefly, I would highlight that if there's something that I would like to see more, for example, in the US that we do have in Europe, it's more accountability for US corporations. So in Europe, we're somewhat sometimes drowning in regulations and government requirements, but they actually work for sustainability in many good ways. So more accountability to US companies, I would say, would be fantastic. And then maybe we could also learn a little about more how to roll out things in a faster speed and in terms of initiatives and innovation and things like that. That is definitely a strength of the US that we need to build on.
Right. Well, I think both of these are good points, and all of them were good points. I think we've reached the end of our event. So thank you. Thank you for me for that. And I've had a fascinating, enjoyable, and I learned a lot. Thank you very much. Handing over to Violet now.
Yes, thank you everyone to all our fantastic panel and moderator Callum for sharing your insight and knowledge and just your fantastic careers with us. Thank you too to everyone who turned in, either watching at home or who was able to join us here in London for the live viewing. Just a few activities to share with you guys that are coming up next. So on the 11th of August, we have Cheers for Beers, a virtual Triton beer tasting for our alumni in the EU. And on the 19th of August, for those based in London, we have the UC Alumni UK Triple T Pub Night. So please join us at these upcoming events if you can. And thank you again all for joining. We look forward to seeing you guys soon.